Check the mic and make
So
sure
welcome everyone to the group chat brought to you by OVERMUGGED. I'm your host Daryl, and with me as usual is Xingwei. Xingwei, how are you?
I'm good.
Do you feel guilty right now? Because the topic we're doing today is how to deal with guilt when you're not studying. Now, this is a common syndrome that some of us, I think some of you might be feeling, which is that if you're not studying and you're like just chilling or like relaxing, you feel a bit guilty for not studying. We just wanted to address that and to, share our perspective on the whole issue, because some of us are deeply affected by it. And, it's not the best thing to be feeling that way. So let's discuss it in today's podcast. Xingwei, maybe we can just kickstart on what's this whole situation that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think maybe like not just not studying, I think in general, sometimes like the modern world, people have this common feeling that like, oh, I'm not doing something productive at this point. Like, am I wasting my time? Question mark, question mark, question mark. And then like, oh, maybe I should be doing something. Then you fall down into that spiral of like you cannot people are not resting properly, like because every time when they're resting they think of like, oh, am I wasting my time? Yeah.
I think there is this obsession with productivity, and I think it's especially pronounced in Singapore because there is a very strong emphasis on it. It's like every single second you need to be doing something. And I myself, I'm also like caught in this syndrome as well. Like if like I'm just doing nothing, I was like, oh shit, I'm wasting time, right?
Yeah.
So I think this whole concept of time is really very abstract and is really very relative to everybody. It's like there isn't a right thing to be doing at any time. But because of the way we structured our day or the way we set goals, sometimes we do feel guilty for not putting in the work. So we want to talk about this issue today and how best you can, work around your schedule and setting your goals up and compartmentalizing, and hopefully you'll feel less guilty, especially when you're taking a well-deserved break. Now, I think the first thing you want to set out is to determine what your goals are, right? I think you just want to break it down into maybe daily goals. Like, what do you want to accomplish today? Now, you want to set aside certain time blocks for you to be achieving those goals, but you also want to set aside time whereby you're resting, maybe when you're having your meals or you're just taking a break. You want those time to be protected time, whereby when you are actually in that rest time and that protected space, you actually don't need to feel guilty about resting because that is your allocated time slot for it. Now, most of the time, what happens instead is that while we plan out our day so ideally, most of the time we procrastinate and things overrun. Then now, when it's supposedly your rest break and then you're supposed to be resting, you realize that you haven't gotten your work done. That is when this whole syndrome kicks in, when you feel guilty when you're resting. So I think that's just the way I see when the situation occurs. Xingwei, do you see any other like scenario where this applies to feel guilty when you're not like studying?
I think there's another thing about like comparing. It's like when you're not when you're I think it's also more pronounced in Singapore. Like when you are resting, but then you are like, what if my friends are studying, or what if like my classmates are like doing something more productive? Then because of that, then you are fine on, like you actually, it is your well-deserved rest time. But because of this kind of thoughts, or because like what other people are thinking, then what other people are doing, then some people may like feel guilty, or like feel the need to, oh, I'm losing out because I am not also studying or also doing something more productive, which is like not necessary, because everyone has their own pace, and while you are working hard, then other people are resting. Like uh everyone has a different timeline and pace. Yeah. I think that like the if it is because of like this kind of like comparison, and like, or even a bit of competition, like but it actually does not work that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit counterintuitive at times because, like, I mean, for most of our listeners that are still in like secondary school or JC, your whole life, right, that you are been conscious of, right, you have been thrown into an education system that emphasizes on, competition, like it's a bell curve. You need to do well relative to the rest. It's always in a constant state of competition. But even in our previous podcast, we also mentioned, like how you can get better and stuff. But I want to draw a very fine line here, which is there's a difference between focusing on yourself versus focusing on your competition. I do not encourage you focusing on competition to stay motivated. I think that is quite toxic and it's not healthy for your mental well-being, in the sense that you are working hard just so you can beat somebody else, or you're working hard so that you can be better than the rest. I think that is not the best mentality to have, because what good does that do to you? Do you like what kind of joy do you derive from it, right? I think it's a very misplaced emphasis just in order to keep things competitive and just to make everybody become better. But I feel like that is a very cutthroat mentality that serves no real purpose in the grand scheme of things, right? After a while, you realize that what's the whole point of this competition is meaningless, right? What really matters is your own journey and your own growth. So whenever we talk about making improvements, right, like to your academics or to your personal growth, it's always about yourself. It's always supposed to be intrinsic. Meaning, when I make the improvement from a D7 to a B3, it's not about beating your classmate, right? That is pointless. But it's about you actually having achieved that growth yourself from a D7 to a B3. So I want you to disregard the rest in that sense, forget them and cut them out of the equation. I want you to focus on you and yourself, right? So if you have worked hard for it by your own standards, you deserve the break, enjoy the break. There's no need to feel guilty just because others are doing it, right? And I think the sooner you get that idea that everybody's journey is going to be different, right? Comparing yourself against the rest sometimes helps to kick in a bit of that motivation, but a lot of times it's just unnecessary stress that you can actually do without. So the way I look at it is that if you sometimes feel guilty because others are working hard and you're not, sometimes it might be relevant, because if you're really slacking off, that's a thing. But if you're really working hard based on your own merits, then there is no need to feel guilty about it. So I think that's something that we wanted to bring across. And when we are talking about rest, right? Meaning when you work and you rest, if you just do work all the time, that is really like there is no breather space for you. Like you have to find time whereby you can actually rest and take a breather. I think that's just equally as important. And when you're taking those breaks, right, you want to make sure that you don't think about your work or your studies anymore. You just focus on just enjoying what you're doing. But I need to caution against activities that might be a bit too addictive. I think gaming is one that comes to mind, right?
Scrolling TikTok.
Right. Social media is another one because it's just non-stop dopamine hit, meaning it makes you feel good, right? That means when you go back to work, you might be distracted because you're still thinking about the addictive activity that you're doing. So that's something that I think we tend to advise against doing too much. I think in moderation, everything in moderation is fine. But I think there's one main point that we are trying to bring across. See, when anything else comes to mind for this topic?
I feel like we need to redefine unproductivity, because sometimes I feel like even when you think that you're unproductive, maybe it's contributing to your future productivity. Like for example, like going for a run, or going for a walk. Like, it sounds like you're wasting time. Like maybe you can like memorize like a few concepts when you are taking that 30 minutes walk. But actually it helps you to like have a clearer mind, and then you can memorize faster. I know I'm not trying to advocate that you are doing things to make yourself more productive, but what I'm trying to say is that this kind of rest and play is actually important for your well-being and functioning in general. So even though they are like typically considered non-productive, but actually they are very important.
Yeah, I think there isn't a need to be, overly. I think there's a very scary thing about the idea of productivity, because it kind of pushes you to a point whereby you're just trying to function like a robot rather than a human. And I think that is an aspect that I hope to be able to talk about as well, because I feel like right now, based on society expectations and social norms especially, is like it's good to suppress your feelings and just get work done. And I feel like over the long term, that is not healthy. Nor is it something that I advocate, meaning that you just get your work done at all costs. I don't think that's the way you should be looking at things, especially when it comes to academics. There is actually a very nice spot whereby you actually enjoy learning, and then that process of learning pushes you to want to learn more. But I think that aspect is heavily lost, especially in a highly competitive education system, where you don't have the time to worry about the curiosity part of learning, but you are actually bogged down by the constant need to do well for exams and stuff. I don't like that part about the education system, but there's not much we can do to tangibly change it, other than maybe for what me and Sing we're trying to do here, which is just to talk about certain topics, just to make your life a little better, to get you enlightened in some of the things that you guys might not be aware of. So there is this obsession with productivity, and I think in context to education is quite dangerous because it takes away the joy of learning as well. So I hope that, while we are focused on the goals, which are exams and O levels, A levels, you don't subtract away from the core enjoyment from learning. I think that's something that, like you're always constantly growing and learning new things. That is supposed to be a beautiful process for your growth. Now, you also want to maybe take a moment and take a breather to think about why you're doing it. I think that has a very big contribution to staying productive, or feeling guilty when you're not being productive. Because if at the end of the day, your goal is that you want to say score a certain grade for your O level or A level, then productivity comes into play, whereby you need to put in the work and you need to aim towards that goal. But you also kind of want to like demarcate where are the boundaries of the playground, that you know that when you are studying, you have to study. Then you keep that boundary there, but you don't let that boundary constantly expand unnecessarily, meaning you don't get over stressed out, like you don't even eat your meals properly. I think that is one. Or you are not spending time with your family, right? Time that you can never recover back again. Or you're not doing activities that you actually genuinely enjoy, like maybe playing a sport or like music and stuff like that. Don't stop yourself from pursuing your hobbies, all in the name of productivity, all in the name of being competitive in the education system. Overall, in the grand scheme of things, like what Singwei mentioned, it actually subtracts more than it inputs. One of my scariest worry, especially in the education system that is so highly competitive, is that it takes away personality from students. It takes away their hobbies and dreams and interests. That is something that I wish we are able to reverse, or at least control the damage on, because there's just so much time and effort that is necessity to put into studying and productivity and stuff like that, that it takes away time for hobbies and genuine quality time that you want to spend with your loved ones or even your friends. Like these memories are going to last you more than maybe a chapter that you revise. I think that is the fine line that you have to draw when we say do not feel guilty if you're not studying. Of course, during allocated times where you're supposed to study, go for it. Be as productive as possible. But once it's time to play, you play. Once it's time to explore your interests, you go for it. You don't have to feel guilty doing something you like just because of your excessive need for productivity. I think it's just about finding that balance. Yep. Singwei, any last thoughts before we wrap up this podcast?
Very well put. Like, I think when we say do not feel guilty, because like you already did all you can, and then rest of the time, like, you're gonna live your life. Because while we mentioned other points before, that as a student, your responsibility is to study, but your life is more than just being a student. You're a daughter, you are a sister, you are a friend, maybe you have a pet, and maybe you're an athlete, maybe you have a hobby. Yeah, great. Those are also part of your life.
So don't feel guilty living the life you want to live, but you got to get the job you need to do. You need to get it done, right? So you take responsibility for what you need to do, but beyond that, live the life that you want to live. All right. I know it might not be the easiest thing to do, especially in exam periods and stuff, but still find that mini pockets of time, maybe listening to your favorite artist on your way back home, watching maybe just a short video on the way. You don't have to feel guilty about doing those things. It's just that when it comes time to start studying or like doing work, you just get work done. Then once you're done, you're free to do what you want. So most important message for this podcast is live your life the way you enjoy. There's no need to feel guilty for enjoying what you're doing. All right. I think that's the last thing you want to be feeling. So don't guilt trip yourself too much. But when work needs to be done, get it done. And with that, we come to the end of today's podcast. Leave us a like and remember to subscribe to the channel for more future videos. Okay, we'll see you people. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
It sound right, boy.